The room was large, but it never felt warm. Rows of chairs faced a single piano at the front, shiny and black, sitting under bright lights. The walls were tall and plain, and the sound of every small movement seemed to echo. For most students, this room was just another place to attend class. For her, it felt like a place where she slowly disappeared. She always chose a seat near the back, not because she wanted to be unseen, but because it felt safer there. From the back, she could watch without being watched. She could listen without being asked to speak. Her hands usually rested in her lap, fingers lightly touching, as if they were holding on to something invisible. She loved music, but she had learned long ago not to show it. The teacher stood near the piano, tall and confident, with a voice that filled the room easily. This teacher believed in strong voices, quick answers, and bold confidence. The students who spoke loudly were praised. The ones who raised their hands fast were noticed. Those who stayed quiet were often forgotten. She was one of the quiet ones. She listened carefully during every lesson. She watched how the teacher's fingers moved when demonstrating a piece. She noticed the pauses, the changes in sound, the way music could rise and fall like breathing. At home, she practiced on an old keyboard with a few broken keys. Sometimes the sound wasn't perfect, but she learned to adjust. She learned to listen more deeply. Music became her safe place, even when the world felt heavy. But no one in that room knew that. On that day, the class felt different from the start. There was a strange energy in the air, like something was about to happen. The teacher seemed impatient, tapping a pen against the piano lid while speaking. Several students were talking quietly, laughing, not paying much attention. She sat still, eyes lowered. Hoping the class would pass without trouble, the teacher began asking questions about a new piece they had been studying. A few confident students answered quickly. The teacher nodded, smiling, praising their effort. Then the teacher's eyes moved across the room. Stopping near the back, they stopped on her. "Well," the teacher said, with a slight pause, "we haven't heard from you in a while." Her heart skipped. The room suddenly felt smaller. She looked up slowly, unsure if she had heard correctly. The teacher was looking directly at her. Every other face turned to, she could feel the heat in her cheeks, the quiet pressure of attention she never wanted. "Do you understand today's lesson?" the teacher asked. She opened her mouth, then closed it. Words felt stuck somewhere deep inside. She nodded gently, hoping that would be enough. The teacher raised an eyebrow. "Nodding doesn't tell me much." A few students smiled. Someone near the front let out a soft laugh. She tried to speak, but her voice came out low and thin. "I think so. I think so," the teacher repeated, louder this time, with a small smile that didn't feel kind. "Music isn't about, I think so. It's about confidence." The room felt tense. She wished she could sink into her chair. The teacher continued, "If you understand, then you should be able to show us." Her chest tightened. The teacher gestured toward the piano. "Go on. Come up here and play." For a moment she thought it was a joke. A bad one, but still a joke. The teacher had never asked her to play before. Never even asked if she practiced. Why now? She stayed seated, frozen. "Well," the teacher said, "don't be shy." A few students turned to look at her more closely now. Some looked curious. Others looked amused. A whisper passed through the room, followed by another quiet laugh. Her legs felt heavy as she stood up. Every step toward the front felt longer than the last. She could hear her own breathing, fast and uneven. Her hands shook slightly at her sides. She pressed her fingers together to steady them. As she walked, her mind filled with old memories. Moments when she had raised her hand and been ignored. Times she had tried to speak and been talked over. She remembered being told once that she was too quiet to matter. That silence followed her now like a shadow. She reached the piano bench and stopped. The teacher stepped aside, giving her space. "Go ahead," they said, arms crossed. "Let's hear what you've got." There was something in the tone that made her stomach drop. It wasn't encouragement. It felt like a challenge. Like the teacher expected her to fail. She glanced at the keys. They looked different up close. Cleaner, brighter, more intimidating. The piano felt alive, waiting. She sat down slowly. The bench was colder than she expected. She placed her hands in her lap, not yet ready to touch the keys. The room was very quiet now. No whispers. No laughs. Just waiting. Her heart beat hard in her chest. She could feel it in her ears. The teacher cleared their throat. Any time. She swallowed. In her mind, doubt began to speak. What if her fingers slipped? What if she forgot everything? What if the sound came out wrong? She imagined the teacher shaking their head, the class laughing again, the embarrassment staying with her long after the class ended. Her shoulders teemed. She thought about standing up and saying she couldn't do it, that she wasn't ready, that she didn't feel well. Any excuse would have worked. The teacher would probably sigh and wave her away, confirming what they already believed. But something held her there. Maybe. It was the countless nights she had practiced alone. Maybe it was the music that lived quietly inside her, waiting for a chance to breathe. Or maybe it was the simple truth that she was tired of being invisible. She placed one hand on the piano. The keys felt smooth and cool under her fingers, familiar yet different. She rested both hands lightly, not pressing down yet, just feeling. The teacher shifted their weight, clearly growing impatient. Behind her, the class waited. Some leaned forward. Others leaned back, arms crossed, expecting this moment to end quickly. She closed her eyes for a brief second. In that moment, the room faded. The chairs, the walls, the faces, all of it softened in her mind. She imagined herself at home, sitting at her old keyboard. She imagined the quiet of her room, the comfort of being alone with the music. Her breathing slowed. When she opened her eyes again, her hands were steady. She lifted them slightly above the keys. The teacher watched closely now. Their confident expression unchanged. They seemed sure of how this would end. The room held its breath. Her fingers hovered in the air. Just for a moment longer, and then the first note was about to be played. The music room was bigger than it needed to be. High ceilings made every sound travel far, even the smallest cough or the scrape of a chair. At the front stood a grand piano, black and polished, catching the light from above. It looked important, almost untouchable. For many students, it was just an instrument. For her, it was something much more. She sat near the back of the room, as she always did. Not because anyone told her to, but because that seat felt safe. From there, she could see everything without being noticed too much. She could listen. She could observe. She could breathe. She was the kind of student teachers often forgot. Not because she didn't care, but because she didn't demand attention. She didn't raise her hand quickly. She didn't speak loudly. She didn't interrupt. Her silence was not empty. It was full of thoughts, feelings, and quiet effort. But silence is easy to miss. Music meant everything to her, though no one knew it. At home, she practiced whenever she could. Her keyboard was old and uneven. A few keys didn't work well. Some sounded softer than others. But she learned to work around that. She learned to listen closely. She learned patience. Music became the one place where she felt understood. Even when no one else seemed to see her. In class, she listened carefully. Every lesson mattered to her. She watched the teacher's hands. She noticed the small details others ignored. The way a note was held longer. The way silence could be just as powerful as sound. She wanted to learn. She wanted to grow. But she kept those desires quiet. The teacher that day stood near the piano, confident and loud. Their voice carried easily through the room. This teacher liked students who spoke up fast and played with confidence. The bold ones got smiles and praise. The quiet ones were often left behind, even if they worked just as hard. That morning, the teacher seemed restless. They tapped a finger against the piano lid while speaking. The lesson moved quickly. Questions were asked. The same few students answered, almost racing each other. The teacher nodded and smiled at them. She stayed still in her seat, eyes lowered, hands folded. She hoped the class would pass without drawing attention to her. She had learned to hope for that. But something felt off. The teacher paused suddenly, and scanned the room. Their eyes moved from face to face, then stopped near the back. They stopped on her. "Well," teacher said, their voice calm but sharp, "we haven't heard from you today." Our stomach tightened. The room felt smaller, like the walls had moved closer. She looked up slowly. For a moment, she wondered if the teacher meant someone else. But their eyes stayed on her. Other students turned to look. She felt their attention like a weight. "Do you understand what we've been working on?" the teacher asked. Her mouth felt dry. She nodded gently. It was easier than speaking. The teacher tilted their head. Nodding isn't an answer. A few students smiled. Someone near the front chuckled quietly. Her face grew warm. She tried to speak. I think so," she said, barely louder than a whisper. "I think so." The teacher repeated, louder now. "Music doesn't work with 'I think so.' Music needs confidence." The word confidence hung in the air. It felt heavy. The teacher crossed their arms. "If you understand, then you can show us." Her heart skipped. The teacher pointed toward the piano. "Come on, go ahead and play." For a second, she thought she had misheard. The teacher had never asked her to play before. Not once. Why now? Why like this? She stayed seated, frozen. "Well," the teacher said again. "Don't be shy." Whispers moved through the room. Some students leaned toward each other. Others looked straight at her, curious, amused, or unsure. Her legs felt stiff as she stood up. The chair made a soft sound as it slid back. That sound seemed too loud. Every step forward felt slow and heavy, like she was walking through water. She could hear her heartbeat in her ears. Her hands trembled slightly, and she pressed her fingers together, trying to calm them. She kept her eyes down as she walked, afraid of meeting anyone's gaze. Memories rushed in. Times she had been overlooked. Moments when she tried to speak and wasn't heard. Comments about how quiet she was, how she needed to come out of her shell. She remembered feeling small. Again and again, she reached the front of the room and stopped near the piano. Bench. The teacher stepped aside with a small gesture. "Go on," they said. "Let's see what you can do." There was a tone in their voice that made her chest tighten. It didn't sound encouraging. It sounded like they were waiting for her to fail. She looked at the piano keys. They were clean and bright under the lights. Very different from the worn keys at home. The piano felt big, powerful, almost alive. She sat down slowly. The bench felt cold. Her feet barely touched the floor. She rested her hands in her lap, fingers curled tightly. The room grew quiet. No laughter, no whispers. Just waiting. The teacher stood nearby, arms crossed, confident. They seemed sure of the outcome. Her thoughts raced. What if she made a mistake? What if her fingers slipped? What if she froze and couldn't play anything at all? The fear felt sharp and real. She thought about standing up and saying she couldn't do it, that she didn't feel well, that she wasn't ready. Any excuse would end this moment. The teacher would probably nod, maybe sigh, and move on. The class would forget soon enough. But something stopped her. She thought about the nights she practiced alone. The way music helped her feel less lonely. The way it gave her strength when words failed. She thought about how much it hurt to always be underestimated. Slowly, she placed one hand on the piano. The keys felt smooth and cool. Her fingers recognized the feeling right away. Familiar. Comforting. She placed her other hand beside it. The teacher cleared their throat. Any time now. She took a deep breath. For a brief moment, she closed her eyes. The room faded. The faces disappeared. She imagined her small room at home. The quiet. The soft hum of the old keyboard. She felt her breathing slow. When she opened her eyes, her hands were steady. Behind her, the class leaned in. Even the ones who expected nothing were curious now. The silence felt thick, full of tension. The teacher watched closely. Their confident look unchanged. Her fingers hovered above the keys. The entire room seemed to hold its breath, and just as her fingers began to lower, ready to touch the first Keitha moment paused,